You know, one thing that I've learned from speaking and coaching so many, almost hundreds of intermediate learners, the problem is not that they don't know enough English words, they don't understand English. It's more about activating those words. Most of them don't struggle because they don't know the grammar or they don't know what the word is. Oftentimes they know a simple word to describe what they want to describe. But the bigger problem that hinders their fluency is overthinking. Or in other words, there's a mental overload. They're thinking way too much when they are speaking, and that is the reason why they are not fluent. If you are an expat living abroad, or if you're a professional who urgently need to use English in your day-to-day, and you're at this phase where you know enough English but you just somehow cannot get it out, you might benefit from coaching. So the next batch for English Sprint Academy opens on January 18th, and you can apply using the links below. I'll see you soon. So if you are an intermediate learner, you can very much relate to this, okay? So if you're a beginner and you don't know enough words, this video is not for you, so feel free to leave. When you're speaking and your brain goes like overdrive, it's like, is this the right grammar? Am I using this correctly? Will the speaker understand it if I use it like this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, what if I make a mistake? And oftentimes, even before you finish your sentence, your brain has interrupted you so many times that you start to just give up. You know, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to finish this sentence. Never mind. I'm not gonna. I'm not even gonna say anything at this point. And this problem is much more common than you might think. And this happens not because your English is bad. It's just because your focus is in the wrong place. So I want to tell you a story about one of my students, Tria, who just finished her sprint with me recently. So about a month ago, I had a private coaching call with her because she was one of the star students. And of course, she was telling me about her problems. And then at one point, I asked her to tell me a story. So then she told me about this story about how her daughter had a mini accident a couple of days ago. And I asked her, okay, tell me about it. What happened? And then at that point, she was telling me the story so well with very vivid details that I was really able to imagine what happened.
She was playing around in the garage with the scooter, and then she fell off. And then, I don't know, somehow her pinky toe just stuck in between of that rubber carpet.
And she was doing it without any interruption. She did it in really good flow. And then she really started to speak so naturally and just very much at ease. It was very clear. The messages and the images that she was trying to convey to me was really delivered. It was delivered very well to me. And at that point, I remember thinking, wow, she's doing this very well. What is happening? And then, of course, we talked after that. And then I asked her, what happened there? You know, you did it super well. And then she said, yeah, I wasn't really thinking much, you know, like there wasn't really a lot of pressure, maybe because she was also feeling quite comfortable with me at that moment.
What was happening in your head when you explained things?
It's just, again, it's relaxing because I don't have that, that pressure.
And also, I pointed it out to her. I asked her, when you were telling the story, what was happening in your head? Were you visualizing the moments as it was happening? And she was like, yes, that's exactly what was happening.
Right now, is it that when you were explaining what happened with her pinky toe, di kepala kamu sedang imagining apa yang sedang terjadi nggak?
Iya. Iya. Jadi membayangkan.
So this is the key. When you're telling a story, when you're explaining something to someone else, the thing that you need to focus on is the moment itself. What is it that you are trying to tell? As for her, she was imagining and replaying that moment when her daughter got into that mini accident. The daughter is okay, by the way. So yeah, and while she's visualizing and replaying those scenes in her head, the words just come out by itself. And again, this is only applicable if you are at an intermediate level, which means that you know enough words, you've exposed yourself to a lot of English, but somehow the biggest problem is that you're not able to speak about it yourself in a way that is very clear and natural. But at this point, it was a breakthrough moment for her and also for myself. So what was different from other times where she was feeling nervous? So usually when she speaks, let's say as recording herself or sometimes speaking with me, she pauses, she corrects herself, she overthinks the word choices, and she's thinking about, okay, is this grammar correct or not? When you're practicing by yourself, it's okay to think about these things, to correct yourself, even if you talk to ChatGPT asking for correction. But when you're in an actual conversation with a real person, these are things that you should not be thinking about, because it's just going to not do you any favors. And whenever you overthink, or she overthinks, she's gonna start sounding hesitant. Her words would come out a little bit more choppy because she is thinking and trying to retrieve the words, because she's very careful. There's a lot of pressure. But in the story, she forgot all of that. She wasn't thinking about what grammar to use. She wasn't thinking about how I would react. She was just in the moment, thinking about the scene, feeling the emotions, and she just speaks as that movie is playing in her head. And at that point, she wasn't performing, she was just experiencing the English. And that is the key. In order for you to speak fluently with good flow, you need to be present in the moment. So this also happens to me personally. So I live in Bali and I have a lot of friends from all over the world, and I use English on a day-to-day basis. I always use English to speak with friends and just people around me. And then sometimes I get a little bit nervous when I'm too conscious of myself. When I think that, okay, I want to appear funny, or I want to appear smart. Oh, I want to use these words to seem cool or whatever. This always backfires at me. However, when I tell a story and not think about any of those and just think about that moment as it's happening, that's when I'm the most engaging. So for example, actually this happened during a sprint meeting about a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling my students about the time where my visa got rejected, and it was a very emotional moment for me. So the way I told the story is that I didn't care about anybody else who was listening to me. I was just in the moment. I was just reliving that experience where I was in the visa office handing out my documents, and then let's say I was missing a document, and then I got very anxious, and the staff was like telling me that I need to come back in a couple of days, but I wouldn't, all of these things. And I get very much present, and the emotion really shows, because as I'm speaking it, I'm also reliving it. I'm reliving the memory, I'm replaying everything. And this is how you become present, and words just come out more naturally. Because the thing is, when you're overthinking, you are not in the conversation. You're in your head, you're observing yourself, you're editing every word, you're worrying about how you might sound, and you often interrupt yourself even before you stop, right? But when you're truly engaged, when your focus is on the right thing, when your focus is on the message instead of the form, instead of the language, your brain is starting to connect the thought to the language. Try to think of moments where you're telling a story to your friends in your native language, and you just think about the story instead of thinking about how people would perceive you. This also applies not in English, but also in your native language. So the question is, why do a lot of learners overthink? A lot of learners overthink because this is how you were trained in English classes. In English classes, the goal is to speak and to write perfectly so that you're graded, you have a high grade, right? Because maybe you're applying for university, you need to hit a certain score to get accepted, so the pressure is on. And then you, of course, have to overthink because your future is at stake. At school, you're not trained to prioritize connection, having a real conversation with people where you can connect over stories. So this is why you are not used to thinking this way. It's not your fault, it may be the system's fault. So this is why every time you speak, your brain would go, what is the right answer? Instead of, what do I want to express? What do I want to say? But then in real conversations, you want to lower the pressure for yourself. Real conversations, communication is often messy, it's emotional, it's spontaneous, and oftentimes speaking perfectly is not expected. Sure, maybe there are some circles, some people who expect you to speak perfectly, but why would you want to be in this kind of circle anyways? You want to speak with your friends at ease, you want to feel comfortable, you want to connect. There are times where you need to be in these situations, but that's for another video. So that's why the moment that you want to control every sentence, that's when you're going to lose the natural rhythm that would make your speech flow. So if you need to take anything from this video, please understand that at this point, your problem is not so much your English knowledge, your grammar, or your lack of vocabulary, but it's more about mental interference. The goal is not to study harder, but shift focus and then practice. Practice telling a story while you let that movie play in your head. And when you speak either to yourself or to your friends, your family or colleagues if you work abroad, practice focusing on the right thing. Practice trying to let go of how other people would perceive you, or letting go about the need to be correct at all times, and just let the conversation flow. You would be surprised how much at ease you would feel if you put the pressure down. So when you speak, stop focusing on how you sound, but what is happening in your mind. Be more aware. So next time, if you're describing a story, you want to see it in your head. If you want to tell a story, you want to feel it. And if you want to tell an opinion, you need to mean it. So if your attention is on the message, your words will come out. But if your attention is on yourself, the words will hide. So remember that. If you are an expat living abroad, or if you're a professional who urgently need to use English in your day-to-day, and you're at this phase where you know enough English but you just somehow cannot get it out, you might benefit from coaching. So the next batch for English Spritz Academy opens on January 18th, and you can apply using the links below. I'll see you soon.